Dad's Rolex was the only thing he left behind. Moem and her new husband sold it to fund my arrogant stepbrother's startup. Then the pawnshop owner called. "Ma'am, you should come see what was concealed inside this watch." Can you even imagine? The last, precious gift from your dead father, a cherished family heirloom, completely sold off by your own mother and her new husband to fund your deadbeat stepbrother's pathetic startup. I thought I'd lost the last piece of my dad forever. But then, a phone call from a seedy pawnshop changed everything, exposing a betrayal far deeper than I could have ever conceived. "You see," the owner said, "ma'am, you need to see what was hidden inside this watch." What the hell happened next? Oh, you're about to find out. My name is Eliza Barnes, I'm 32 years old, and losing my dad, Thomas, 3 months ago to heart failure, absolutely shattered me. He was my rock. My dad, an engineer, believed in precision, in things that worked reliably, and that explained his love for fine watches. His Rolex Date wasn't just an expensive accessory, it was a symbol of our family legacy, passed down from his father, my grandpa James. That watch had seen my dad through every single important moment of his adult life. My parents divorced when I was 17. On the surface, it was amicable, but I always sensed there was more to it than they let on. My mom, Kathleen, didn't waste any time rebuilding her life. Within a year, she married Robert Wilson, a wealthy businessman who owned several car dealerships. And with Robert came his son, Dominic. Dominic was 35, 3 years older than me, and still living at home, despite having never held a job for more than 6 months. He carried himself with this air of entitlement, always blaming external factors for his failures. Yet, Robert constantly funded his various, invariably disastrous, business ventures. The latest? A mobile app that was supposedly going to revolutionize how people ordered coffee. As someone who actually worked in marketing, I could tell it was just a poorly conceived copy of something already out there. Maintaining a relationship with my mom after the divorce became really difficult. Our conversations always revolved around how wonderful Robert was, how brilliant Dominic was, and how I should be more ambitious like my stepbrother. The irony wasn't lost on me. I put myself through college and built a steady career as a marketing executive, while Dominic had dropped out of 3 different universities. Meanwhile, Dad lived quietly in the modest house I grew up in. He never remarried, focusing on his work and his hobbies. We had dinner every Sunday, a tradition we maintained religiously. 2 years ago, his health began to decline. High blood pressure, then heart complications. I started visiting more often, taking him to doctor's appointments, helping around the house. During one of our last conversations, he held his Rolex, looking at it with such nostalgia. "This watch has been through so much with me, Eliza," he said, his voice soft. "It keeps perfect time, you know. Never let me down once in 40 years. When he passed away 3 months ago, I was devastated, but not surprised. His heart was failing. His will was simple. Most of his possessions went to charity, his house sold with proceeds going to the American Heart Association. But he specifically stated that his Rolex should go to me. To my daughter, Eliza Barnes, I leave my Rolex Datejust watch, which my father gave to me. May it remind her of the value of time, and that she has always been the most precious part of mine." Reading those words at the lawyer's office, I broke down. The watch wasn't particularly valuable in monetary terms, maybe $15,000 at most, but its sentimental value was immeasurable. It was my connection to Dad, to a family history that extended beyond the broken marriage. After the funeral, Mom helped clean out Dad's house. I took some personal items, photographs, books, a few small keepsakes. But the watch, for a temporary moment, remained with Mom. As we sorted through everything, she suggested keeping it in her safe until I decided whether to wear it or store it securely. Trusting her, I agreed, planning to pick it up once the chaos of the funeral and estate settlement had passed. That decision would come back to haunt me in ways I never could have imagined. Last Thursday was our monthly family dinner at Mom and Robert's sprawling suburban home. These dinners were usually tense affairs I endured more out of obligation than enjoyment. As I pulled into their driveway, I noticed Dominic's brand new Tesla parked prominently near the entrance. Something about that car immediately triggered my suspicion. Last month, he'd been complaining about being completely broke. I arrived a few minutes early and let myself in with the key Mom had given me years ago. Voices drifted from Robert's study, the door slightly ajar. I wasn't usually one to eavesdrop, but hearing my father's name mentioned made me pause in the hallway. Thomas never appreciated what he had anyway, Robert was saying. $15,000 was honestly more than I expected for such an old watch. The pawn shop guy said it was in pristine condition, Dominic replied. Said he could easily flip it for $20,000 to a collector. Well, the important thing is that your business is now funded, Robert continued. This app of yours is going to be a game changer, son. Much better use for that money than letting a watch sit in a drawer. My blood ran cold. They couldn't possibly be talking about my father's watch. Mom would never allow that, but a sickening feeling in my stomach told me otherwise. I pushed the door open. What watch are you talking about? I demanded, my voice shaking. Robert and Dominic looked up, startled expressions quickly giving way to uncomfortable glances between them. Eliza, we didn't hear you come in, Robert recovered first, standing up from behind his massive mahogany desk. You said something about a watch, I pressed. My dad's watch. Dominic shrugged, tapping away at his phone as if I'd asked about something trivial like the weather. Mom said it was fine. The thing was just collecting dust. I felt like someone had punched me in the stomach. Where is it? Where is the watch? I demanded, my voice rising. Eliza, darling, what is all the commotion about? My mother appeared in the doorway behind me, dressed immaculately, her pearls gleaming. They're talking about selling Dad's Rolex. Tell me they didn't sell it. I turned to her, desperately hoping for denial. The flash of guilt in her eyes confirmed my worst fears before she even spoke. Sweetheart, we thought it was for the best. Dominic needed startup capital for his new business venture. And the watch was just sitting there. Just sitting there? It was mine. Dad left it to me in his will. Tears welled up. How could you do this? Robert stepped in, his tone condescending. Now, Eliza, there's no need for dramatics. It was just a watch. We can buy you another one when Dominic's business takes off. Just a watch? I echoed in disbelief. It was the last thing I had from Dad. It was a family heirloom from his father. Dominic finally looked up from his phone. Look, the money is going to a good cause. This app is going to revolutionize the coffee industry. I've got investors lined up who are just waiting to see the prototype, which I can now afford to develop thanks to the sale. Your coffee app is not a good cause. I shouted. This is theft. That watch was legally mine. Technically, Robert interjected, the watch was in our possession, and your mother agreed to the sale. I turned to Mom, who at least had the decency to look uncomfortable. How could you? You knew what that watch meant to me. To Dad. Eliza, you need to understand, she began. Dominic has real potential this time. His business plan is solid. This isn't like his previous ventures. I laughed bitterly. Not like the food truck that failed after 2 months? Or the cryptocurrency scheme that lost everyone's money? Or the subscription box service for pet rocks? Dominic's face reddened. Those businesses were ahead of their time. The market wasn't ready. The market will never be ready for your half-baked ideas. I snapped. And now you've stolen something precious from me to fund another failure. We didn't steal anything. Robert's voice hardened. Kathleen made a decision about a family asset to help her son. I would think you would want to support your brother's dreams. Stepbrother, I corrected. And my support does not extend to having my inheritance stolen. Mom stepped toward me, reaching out. Sweetheart, please try to understand. Family helps family. The watch was just an object. I stepped back, avoiding her touch. That watch was my connection to Dad, to his father, to our family before you decided Robert and Dominic were more important. That's unfair, she protested. Unfair? You want to talk about unfair? Dad left me one thing that mattered, and you gave it away without even asking me. The dinner that followed was excruciating. We sat around the formal dining table in stony silence, broken only by Robert's attempts at casual conversation and Dominic's excited monologues about his business plans. He described his revolutionary coffee ordering app in grandiose terms. The seed money from the watch is just the beginning, he explained, oblivious to my glare. Once we have the prototype, we'll secure venture capital funding. I'm thinking at least $5 million for the first round. I pushed my plate away, appetite completely gone. Where did you sell it? I asked, interrupting his fantasy. What? Dominic looked annoyed. The watch. Where did you sell it? Which pawn shop? I don't see how that matters, Robert cut in. The transaction is done. I have a right to know, I countered. Mom sighed, Eliza, please. Can we just have a nice dinner? A nice dinner? You expect me to sit here and make pleasant conversation after what you have done? I stood up, throwing my napkin on the table. I cannot believe you would betray Dad's wishes like this. Betray me? Now you're just being melodramatic, Robert said dismissively. That was the final straw. I'm leaving, I declared, and just so you know, I will find that watch, and I will get it back. Good luck with that, Dominic smirked. The money has already been spent on developer deposits. I walked out, ignoring my mother's calls to come back. As I drove home, tears streaming down my face, I felt like I had lost my father all over again. The one tangible connection I had to him was gone. Sold off to fund another of Dominic's doomed ventures. But beneath the grief, a cold, hard determination was building. I would find that watch, whatever it took. The drive home passed in a blur of tears and anger. When I finally reached my apartment, I collapsed on the couch, emotionally drained. The magnitude of the betrayal overwhelmed me. It wasn't just about the watch itself, though that was precious enough. It was what it represented, the last physical connection to my father, a tangible reminder of his love for me. I called my mother repeatedly that night, but she didn't pick up. Instead, she sent a text, I know you're upset. Let's talk when you've calmed down. Her dismissal of my feelings only intensified my anger. How could she not understand what she had done? Sleep eluded me that night. I tossed and turned, replaying memories of my father. I remembered him showing me how to tell time on his Rolex when I was just 6 years old, his patient voice explaining the minute and hour hands. I recalled his pride when he wore it to my high school graduation, how he had checked it repeatedly to make sure we wouldn't be late. The watch had been as much a part of him as his kind eyes and gentle laugh. By morning, determination had replaced some of the raw grief. I called my friend Jessica, who worked as a paralegal. They did what? She exclaimed after I explained. Eliza, that is literally theft. The watch was willed to you specifically. I know, but what can I do? I asked, desperate. The watch is gone, sold to some pawn shop. Jessica suggested a police report or suing my mother and stepfather for its value. The thought of legal action against my own mother made my stomach turn, despite her betrayal. Since the watch was in your mother's possession, with your implicit consent, proving theft would be difficult, Jessica concluded. A civil suit might be possible, but it would be costly, time-consuming, and would permanently damage what remained of your relationship with your mother. The simplest solution would be to find the watch and buy it back. Do you have any idea which pawn shop they sold it to? No, they wouldn't tell me. But how many pawn shops can there be in this city? The answer, as I would discover over the next week, was quite a few. I began calling every pawn shop in the city, describing the watch in detail, a Rolex Day-Date, stainless steel with a blue dial, circa 1980, with a small scratch on the back of the case from when my father had knocked it against a doorframe years ago. Day after day, the same response, sorry, ma'am. Nothing like that has come through here. My search was affecting my work performance. As a marketing executive, I was responsible for several major accounts, but I found myself distracted, checking my phone for return calls from pawn shops and making more calls during my lunch breaks. Lauren, my boss, called me into her office after I zoned out during an important client presentation. "Eliza, what is going on with you?" she asked, concerned rather than angry. "This isn't like you at all." I broke down and told her everything. To my surprise, she was incredibly understanding. "Take some time off," she insisted. "Use your personal days. Sort this out. Your accounts will be here when you get back." Grateful, I took 3 days off, dedicating myself entirely to the search. I expanded my calls to pawnshops in neighboring towns and cities, growing increasingly desperate. I scoured online auction sites, hoping to spot my father's distinctive timepiece. The constant disappointment wore me down. Each night I returned home exhausted and disheartened. I began to wonder if I would ever see the watch again, if this last piece of my father was gone forever. One evening, after another fruitless day of searching, I sat staring at an old photo of Dad and me. In it, he was showing me something on his watch, both of us smiling. Something about the angle made me notice details I had overlooked before. Specifically, the unique way the light caught the crystal. With renewed determination, I decided to visit pawnshops in person, reasoning that I might recognize the watch on site, even if the shop owners couldn't identify it from my description over the phone. I created a list of establishments I hadn't yet contacted, prioritizing those in more upscale areas where a luxury watch might fetch a better price. The physical search proved as disappointing as the phone calls. Shop after shop yielded nothing. By the end of my 3rd day off work, I was beginning to accept that the watch might truly be gone. The thought of returning to normal life without resolution felt like giving up on my father all over again. But I was running out of options. That night, I called my mother again, hoping that enough time had passed for her to recognize the gravity of what she had done. "I want to understand, Mom," I said when she finally answered. "How could you do this to me? To Dad's memory?" She sighed heavily. "Eliza, you have to understand our position. Dominic needed help, and the watch was just sitting in the safe. Your father would have wanted to help family. Dad would never have wanted his watch sold for one of Dominic's schemes." I countered. "And I am family, too. Did you consider what I wanted?" Of course, we did. But sometimes parents have to make difficult decisions. Robert felt very strongly about supporting Dominic's business venture. So, Robert's feelings matter more than mine? More than Dad's explicit wishes? That's not fair, Eliza. We are a family now, all of us. That means supporting each other. "It seems like a one-way street from where I'm standing," I replied bitterly. "Would you have sold a family heirloom of Robert's without asking him? Or something that belonged to Dominic?" Her silence answered my question. "That's what I thought," I said. "Goodbye, Mom." I hung up, feeling more resolved than ever. Even if I never recovered the watch, I would not let this betrayal stand without consequence. My relationship with my mother would never be the same. But perhaps that was inevitable given the choices she had made. Little did I know that the very next day would bring an unexpected turn of events that would change everything. 2 weeks after discovering the theft, I was back at work, trying to focus on a new advertising campaign. My phone rang with an unfamiliar number. Normally, I would let unknown calls go to voicemail, but something compelled me to answer. "Is this Eliza Barnes?" a gruff male voice asked. "Yes, this is she." "Who is calling?" "My name is Harold Jackson. I own Jackson's Valuables pawnshop on Oakwood Avenue. I believe I may have something that belongs to you, or rather, something that should belong to you." My heart skipped a beat. "Are you talking about a Rolex watch?" "Yes, ma'am. A day-date model, purchased from me about 2 weeks ago by a gentleman named Robert Wilson and his son. They mentioned it belonged to your late father." I gripped the phone tighter. "Yes, that is my father's watch. They had no right to sell it. It was left to me in his will." "I figured as much," Harold said. "Something didn't sit right with me about the transaction. That's why I'm calling you now." "You still have it? It hasn't been sold?" Hope surged through me. "No, ma'am. I haven't put it up for sale yet. But that's not the only reason I'm calling. There's something unusual about this watch. Something I discovered during my appraisal that I don't think Mr. Wilson or his son were aware of. What do you mean? I asked, intrigued. I'd rather not discuss it over the phone. Would you be able to come to my shop? I close at 6 tonight. I'll be there at 5:30. I promised, already gathering my things. I explained the situation to Lauren, who immediately waved me off. Go get your father's watch back, she insisted. This is more important than the burger campaign. The drive to Jackson's Valuables took 30 minutes. The shop was sandwiched between a laundromat and a discount furniture store, with a simple sign displaying the name in gold letters. Security bars covered the windows, which showcased an eclectic array of items. As I pushed open the door, a small bell announced my arrival. The interior was cleaner and more organized than I had expected. Behind the counter stood Harold Jackson. He was in his 60s, with silver hair, glasses, and surprisingly kind eyes. Miss Barnes, he inquired. Yes, Mr. Jackson. We spoke on the phone about my father's watch. He nodded, gesturing for me to approach. I appreciate you coming so quickly. I must say, you look a lot like the woman in the photograph. Photograph? I questioned, confused. That's part of what I wanted to show you. He reached beneath the counter and produced a familiar object, my father's Rolex. Still in impeccable condition despite its age. Seeing it again sent a wave of emotion through me. I reached for it instinctively, but Harold held it back gently. Before I hand this over, he said, I'd like to explain why I called you. I've been in this business for 35 years. You learn to read people. To sense when something isn't quite right about a transaction. What do you mean? When Mr. Wilson and his son brought this in, they claimed it was a family heirloom they were selling to fund a business venture. But neither of them knew how to operate the hidden compartment in the watch. Hidden compartment? I echoed, stunned. What hidden compartment? Harold smiled. That was exactly their reaction when I mentioned it during my appraisal. A watch of this vintage and quality, passed down through generations, and the owners didn't know about its most unique feature. That struck me as odd. He turned the watch over and demonstrated a subtle mechanism I had never noticed. With practiced fingers, he pressed a nearly invisible seam on the back of the case and twisted slightly. To my amazement, a thin section of the caseback slid open, revealing a tiny hidden compartment. Many high-end watches from this era had secret compartments, Harold explained. Sometimes for an extra key, sometimes for a memento. Rich folks used to hide microfilm or secret messages during the Cold War. Most people have forgotten about these features nowadays. And there was something inside my father's watch? I asked, breathless. Harold nodded, reaching into a drawer. Two things, actually. This photograph, he handed me a tiny, carefully folded picture that had been reduced to fit the compartment, and this key. The photograph, when carefully unfolded, revealed an image of my father and me at the beach. I was perhaps 10 years old, building a sandcastle while Dad watched proudly. I remembered that day perfectly. A rare vacation we had taken to the Florida coast. It had been one of the happiest days of my childhood. The key was small and unusual, with an ornate design unlike any house or car key I had ever seen. I have no idea what this key opens, Harold said. But I figured it must be important for your father to keep it hidden like that. Tears welled in my eyes. I had no idea. In all these years, he never mentioned a secret compartment. Perhaps he was saving the revelation for the right time, Harold suggested gently. And then he ran out of time before he could share it. Why are you telling me this? I asked. You could have sold the watch without ever contacting me. Harold's expression grew serious. Miss Barnes, I may be in the pawn business, but I have ethics. When someone brings in a family heirloom, especially one with hidden contents, I feel obligated to make sure it ends up where it belongs. The way those men described your father's watch, as just a means to an end for their business venture, didn't sit right with me. Thank you, I said sincerely. You have no idea what this means to me. Now, as to the matter of the watch itself, Harold continued, I paid $15,000 for it. Its market value is closer to $18,000, given its condition and provenance. But considering the circumstances, I am willing to sell it back to you at my cost. No profit from me. The sum was substantial, nearly all of my savings. But there was no question in my mind. I'll take it. I can transfer the money right now. As Harold processed the transaction, I asked, how did you find me? Robert and Dominic surely didn't give you my contact information. Harold smiled. The receipt they signed included the previous owner's name, Thomas Barnes. A quick internet search found his obituary, which mentioned his surviving daughter, Eliza. Finding your number after that was not difficult. You went to all that trouble for a stranger? Let us just say I've seen too many family heirlooms lost forever because no one took the time to ask questions, he replied. Besides, something about their story didn't add up. The stepson kept talking about his revolutionary coffee app while the father was making the deal. Seemed more excited about spending the money than sad about parting with a family treasure. I nodded, understanding completely. His app will fail, like all his other ventures. But he will have stolen my father's watch for nothing. Not stolen anymore, Harold said, handing me the watch at last. It's back where it belongs. The weight of the Rolex in my palm felt right, like recovering a piece of myself. I carefully placed the tiny photograph and mysterious key back in the secret compartment, sealing it as Harold had shown me. Mr. Jackson, I cannot thank you enough, I said, fastening the watch around my wrist where it belonged. Just doing what is right, Miss Barnes. And please, call me Harold. As I left the shop, the watch secured on my wrist, I felt my father's presence more strongly than I had since his death. But the mystery of the key lingered in my mind. What did it open? And why had my father kept it hidden all these years? The drive home from Harold's pawnshop was a blur of emotions, my mind racing with questions about the key and what it might unlock. The watch felt both familiar and new on my wrist, its weight comforting yet mysterious now that I knew its secret. Once home, I sat at my kitchen table and carefully opened the hidden compartment again, removing the tiny photograph and key. Under better lighting, I examined both more thoroughly. The photograph was clearly from our beach vacation in 2002, a trip we had taken after my mother had cancelled summer plans with me to go to Europe with Robert. Dad had stepped in, taking a week off work to show me the ocean for the first time. The memory of his kindness in that moment, prioritizing my happiness over his own disappointment with my mother, brought fresh tears to my eyes. The key was even more puzzling, small and intricate, it appeared to be for a lockbox or small cabinet rather than a door. The head featured an unusual geometric pattern that didn't match any key I had ever seen. Whatever it opened, it was not a standard lock. I spent the evening going through the boxes of my father's belongings I had kept after his death. Most were sentimental items, photo albums, birthday cards I had made him as a child, a few favorite books, and the tie I had given him for his 50th birthday. Nothing that seemed likely to be opened by this peculiar key. Then I remembered the storage unit. After Dad's death, I had placed some of his larger possessions in a small unit across town, items I couldn't fit in my apartment, but couldn't bear to part with, his favorite reading chair, his vinyl record collection, and several boxes of documents and memorabilia I hadn't yet sorted through. Despite the late hour, I drove to the storage facility. Unit 35 contained the remnants of my father's life that had not been sold or donated. The musty smell of old paper and wood greeted me as I rolled up the door and turned on the light. I began systematically searching through boxes. Tax documents, engineering journals, old family photos, nothing relevant. I was about to give up when I spotted a familiar shape, partially hidden behind Dad's record collection, a wooden box, about the size of a thick textbook, that I had overlooked during previous visits. The box was crafted from dark walnut with brass fittings, obviously expensive and carefully maintained. A small brass plate on the front bore my father's initials, TJB, for Thomas James Barnes. Most importantly, there was a keyhole that looked to be the right size for the mysterious key from the watch. With trembling hands, I inserted the key. It fit perfectly, turning with a satisfying click. The lid opened smoothly on well-oiled hinges, revealing several layers of contents neatly organized inside. The top layer contained a series of letters, all addressed to me, but never sent. Each envelope was labeled with a date, spanning the last 5 years of Dad's life. Below these was a leather portfolio containing legal documents, and at the very bottom, a USB drive labeled simply for Eliza. I began with the letters, opening the earliest one first. Dad's familiar handwriting filled the page. My dearest Eliza, if you are reading this, then I am gone, and you have discovered the secret of my old Rolex. I have debated for years whether to tell you about what I discovered, but I feared putting you in an impossible position with your mother and Robert. Now that my health is failing, I realize you deserve to know the truth, even if I am no longer here to help you navigate its consequences. 5 years ago, I uncovered some troubling information about Robert's business practices and how they directly impacted the engineering firm where I worked all my life. The enclosed documents and digital evidence provide the full picture, but the short version is this: Robert deliberately undermined our company's bid on the Westlake development project. Using inside information your mother unknowingly provided him about our proposal. His automotive supply company then secured exclusive contracts with the development that should have gone to firms associated with my employer. The resulting financial damage eventually led to massive layoffs at my company, including many of my friends and colleagues. I was spared due to my seniority, but our firm never fully recovered. I do not share this to turn you against your mother, who I believe was an unwitting participant in Robert's scheme. I have always tried to shield you from the ugly details of our divorce and the business conflicts that contributed to it. But now, you should know the full story so you can protect yourself and perhaps find some justice for those who suffered. With all my love, Dad. I sat on the storage unit floor, stunned by this revelation. Each subsequent letter revealed more details about Robert's unethical business practices, including evidence Dad had quietly gathered over the years. Some letters were more personal, containing advice he wanted to share, or memories he feared would be lost. The most recent letter, dated just 2 months before his death, expressed his love and his hope that I would use the information wisely. The legal documents in the portfolio included bank statements, emails Robert had sent to business associates, forwarded to my father by a whistleblower within Robert's company, and contracts showing the timeline of events exactly as Dad had described. There were also documents showing that my father had made some shrewd investments over the years, building a substantial portfolio that was not mentioned in his will. Finally, I inserted the USB drive into my laptop. It contained videos my father had recorded in the final months of his life, sitting in his favorite chair, speaking directly to me as if we were having a conversation. Seeing him alive again, even on a small screen, was both painful and comforting. Eliza, my sweet girl, he began in the first video. I hope you never have to watch these recordings, that I'll have the chance to tell you all this in person. But my doctors are not optimistic, and I need to make sure you have all the information you need. Over several videos, Dad explained his financial arrangements, including a separate investment account he had established in my name but never mentioned. He detailed exactly how Robert had manipulated events to damage Dad's company while enriching himself, providing names of people who could corroborate his claims if necessary. I never pursued legal action, Dad explained in one video, partly because it would have hurt your mother, and partly because by the time I had gathered enough evidence, the statute of limitations had expired on some of the most serious violations. But you should know the truth about the man she married, if only to protect yourself. The final video was the most personal, recorded just weeks before his death, when he was noticeably weaker. The watch, Eliza, he said, his voice raspy but determined. I never told you about its secret compartment because I wanted to save that revelation for your 30th birthday. By then, I thought you would be established enough in your career to handle this information wisely. But time got away from me, as it often does. He held up his Rolex to the camera. My father showed me this hidden compartment when he gave me this watch. He used it to keep a photo of my mother. I chose to keep a photo of you. My greatest joy. And the key to this box of truths. Whatever you decide to do with this information, know that I trust your judgment completely. You have always made me proud. By the time I finished reviewing everything, dawn was breaking. I carefully repacked the box, taking only the USB drive and the most critical documents with me. The revelation that Robert had essentially sabotaged my father's career and company for his own gain, and that my mother might have unknowingly participated, filled me with a cold anger that made the betrayal even more complex and painful. But beneath the anger was a sense of purpose. My father had trusted me with this information, believed in my ability to use it wisely. The watch had indeed led me to a treasure, though not the kind anyone would have expected. What I would do with this knowledge remained unclear. But one thing was certain: I would not let my father's careful documentation go to waste. As I drove home, the morning sun glinting off the Rolex on my wrist, I felt my father's presence guiding me. The watch had become more than a memento. It was the key, literally and figuratively, to understanding my family's complicated past and perhaps to reshaping its future. Armed with the documents and the USB drive, I spent the weekend meticulously organizing and reviewing everything my father had left me. The investment portfolio alone was staggering, nearly $1 million accumulated through careful investments over decades. Dad had apparently been much more financially savvy than he had ever let on, living modestly while growing his wealth through shrewd stock picks and real estate investments. The documents detailing Robert's business misconduct painted a damning picture. Using information my mother had innocently shared about my father's firm's bid on the Westlake development, Robert had undercut their proposal and diverted contracts to his own affiliated companies. The resulting financial strain had forced my father's firm to lay off 30% of its workforce, including many longtime employees who had been like extended family to us. Most shocking was an email from Robert to his business partner, dated shortly after securing the Westlake contracts: "Thomas Barnes will not be a problem anymore. His firm is bleeding out, and Kathleen has no idea she handed me the knife. By this time next year, I will have consolidated the supply chain entirely under our control." The calculated cruelty of it made my blood boil. Robert had not only undermined my father professionally, but had used my mother to do it, all while pretending to be concerned about Dad's struggling company at family gatherings. I called William Hayes, my father's longtime attorney, and scheduled an urgent meeting for Monday morning. If anyone could help me understand the legal implications, it would be William, who had handled my father's affairs for over 20 years. William's office was in a converted Victorian house downtown. He greeted me warmly, his gray hair and bow tie giving him the appearance of a distinguished professor. "Eliza, it has been too long," he said. "I was so sorry about your father. He was a good man. One of the best clients I ever had the privilege to represent." "Thank you, William. I have recently discovered that there was more to my father's affairs than I realized." I placed the Rolex on his desk. "This watch led me to some surprising information." William's eyebrows rose. "Ah, so he did leave you the Rolex. Good. I was concerned when it was not mentioned during the estate distribution. You knew about it?" "Your father and I discussed it several times in his final months. He was quite adamant that it should go to you directly. Not through the general estate." William peered at me over his glasses. "Did something happen to it?" I explained the entire situation: my mother and Robert selling the watch, my desperate search, Harold Jackson's call, and the discovery of the hidden compartment. William listened intently, his expression darkening when I mentioned the sale of the watch. "That was explicitly against Thomas's wishes," he noted. "I have the specific bequest documented." "At this point, I have recovered the watch," I said, "but what I found because of it raises serious questions." I shared the contents of the lockbox, the letters, the documents detailing Robert's business misconduct, and a summary of the investment portfolio my father had established for me. William reviewed everything carefully. When he finished, he removed his glasses and rubbed the bridge of his nose. "Your father came to me about 5 years ago with suspicions regarding Robert Wilson's business practices," he revealed. "We discussed potential legal actions, but as Thomas mentioned in his letters, the statute of limitations had expired on some of the most egregious violations. Additionally, he was concerned about the impact on you and your relationship with your mother." "So, there is nothing that can be done about what Robert did?" I asked, disappointed. "From a criminal perspective, probably not at this late date," William admitted. "However, there could still be civil liability, particularly if any of his actions constituted fraud or breach of fiduciary duty to shareholders." Those typically have longer statutes of limitations. He tapped the folder containing information about my father's investments. As for this, everything appears to be in order. Thomas established a separate trust in your name, with me as the trustee until such time as you were notified of its existence. Now that you are aware, we can transfer full control to you immediately. I had no idea he had saved so much, I said. Your father lived modestly, but invested wisely, William smiled. He was particularly successful with early investments in several technology companies. He wanted to ensure you would be financially secure, especially given his concerns about Robert's influence over your mother's finances. What would you advise me to do about Robert? I asked, trusting William's judgment as my father had. William considered the question carefully. You have several options. You could pursue civil action based on the evidence your father collected, though litigation would be expensive and emotionally draining. You could report his actions to the relevant regulatory agencies, which might investigate, but would not necessarily result in any personal compensation. Or. He paused. You could confront him directly with what you know, which might provide leverage in protecting your interests going forward. What would my father have wanted me to do? Thomas was not vindictive by nature, William replied thoughtfully. He was more concerned with protection than punishment. I believe he would want you to use this information to protect yourself and perhaps gain some acknowledgement of the harm done rather than embarking on a lengthy legal battle. I nodded, seeing the wisdom in this approach. And the investment portfolio? Should I tell my mother about it? That is entirely your decision, William said. Legally, it is yours alone. Your father deliberately kept it separate from his will and other assets, likely to ensure Robert could not influence its disposition. After discussing the details of transferring control of the investments to me, I left William's office with a clear plan. I would confront Robert and my mother with what I knew, not to exact revenge, but to establish boundaries and perhaps restore some balance to our relationship. As I drove home, I reflected on how the watch had set these events in motion. What had seemed like a simple memento had become the key to understanding my family's complicated dynamics and my father's silent struggles. He had trusted me to handle this information with maturity and wisdom, and I was determined not to let him down. That evening, I called my mother. We need to talk, I said when she answered. All of us, including Robert and Dominic. I have discovered some things about Dad's estate that everyone needs to hear. Is this about the watch again? She asked, sounding tired. Eliza, we've apologized for that. No, you have not, I corrected her. But this is about much more than the watch now. I will be there tomorrow evening at 7. Please make sure everyone is home. Before she could protest, I ended the call. The confrontation would not be easy, but it was necessary. The truth my father had preserved needed to see the light of day, and I was the only one who could ensure that happened. The next evening, I arrived at my mother's house exactly at 7 o'clock, the Rolex on my wrist and a portfolio of selected documents in my hand. I had chosen carefully what to bring, including only what was necessary to make my case. Without revealing all of my father's evidence, some things would remain between him and me, preserved in the storage unit lockbox. My mother opened the door, her expression a mixture of concern and irritation. Eliza, what is this all about? Robert had to cancel an important dinner meeting for this. Trust me, Mother, he will find this meeting even more important, I replied, stepping past her into the foyer. Robert and Dominic were waiting in the living room. Robert was standing by the fireplace with a drink in hand. Dominic was sprawled on the sofa, tapping on his phone as usual. Well, the prodigal daughter returns, Robert said, his attempt at humor falling flat. Kathleen says you have some urgent financial matter to discuss. I do, I confirmed, taking a seat in the armchair across from them. It concerns my father's estate. The watch that was stolen from me, and some interesting documents I discovered as a result. Stolen is a strong word, my mother protested, sitting beside Dominic. We've already discussed this, Eliza. Actually, we haven't really discussed it, I countered. You dismissed my feelings and defended your actions. But that is only part of why I am here. I placed the Rolex on the coffee table between us. I managed to track down Dad's watch and buy it back. Despite your efforts to keep the pawnshop information from me. Robert's eyebrows rose slightly. You went to all that trouble for a watch? I told you we could replace it once Dominic's business takes off. This watch is irreplaceable, I said firmly. But more importantly, it led me to discover some things my father had been keeping track of for years. I opened the portfolio and removed the first document, a copy of the email where Robert had gloated about using information from my mother to undermine my father's company. Does this look familiar, Robert? I slid it across the table. The color drained from his face as he recognized his own words. My mother leaned forward, confused, and picked up the paper when Robert made no move to take it. What is this? She asked, reading it quickly. Her expression shifted from confusion to shock. Robert. Kathleen has no idea. She handed me the knife. What knife? What did I do? It's nothing. Just business talk taken out of context, Robert dismissed, but his usual confidence had vanished. Where did you get this, Eliza? From my father, I replied. He kept meticulous records of how you used information Mom innocently shared with you about his company's bid on the Westlake development. How you deliberately undercut their proposal and diverted contracts to your own affiliated businesses. How the resulting financial strain forced his firm to lay off dozens of people, many who had worked there for decades. That is ridiculous, Robert blustered, but his eyes darted nervously to my portfolio, wondering what else it contained. Is it? I removed several more documents, including correspondence between Robert and developers that clearly showed his manipulation of the bidding process using insider information. Dad had a friend at Westlake Development who provided him with copies of all this. He knew exactly what you did, Robert. My mother was reading through the papers, her hands trembling slightly. Robert, tell me this is not true. Tell me I didn't help you hurt Thomas's company. Robert's silence was damning. Dominic finally looked up from his phone, sensing the tension. What is going on? Your father deliberately sabotaged my dad's company, I told him. Used my mother to get insider information, then exploited it for his own gain. Dozens of people lost their jobs as a result. It was just business, Robert finally said defensively. Everyone looks for an edge. Thomas should have been more competitive. It was not just business, I countered. It was personal. You wanted to hurt him because he still meant something to Mom even after they divorced, because she still respected him when she had stopped respecting you. That's enough. Robert slammed his glass down on the mantel. I will not be accused in my own home by a girl who clearly misunderstands how the business world works. I understand perfectly, I said calmly. I also understand that Dad knew everything but chose not to pursue legal action because he did not want to hurt Mom or disrupt my relationship with her. He was protecting his family to the end, even at great personal cost. My mother looked devastated. All those people who lost their jobs? Thomas's friends. I talked about the bid because I was proud of his work. I thought I was just making conversation with my husband. You were, I assured her. Robert was the one who exploited your trust. Just like he and Dominic exploited your trust when they convinced you to sell Dad's watch. About that watch, Robert interjected, clearly trying to change the subject. If it means that much to you, we can reimburse you for having to buy it back. Right, Dominic? Dominic shrugged. The money is gone, Dad. Spent on development costs. All $15,000 already spent? I asked skeptically. The app isn't even past the concept stage according to what you told me last week. Development is expensive, Dominic muttered, not meeting my eyes. Let me guess, I said. Most of that money went to a developer who happens to be a friend of yours, or perhaps to pay off some personal debts. The app was just a convenient excuse. Dominic's flush confirmed my suspicion. Enough about the app, Robert cut in. What exactly do you want, Eliza? Money? Is that why you're dredging up ancient history and making these accusations? I laughed, genuinely amused by his assumption. I don't need your money, Robert. Dad took care of that. What do you mean? My mother asked. Dad left me more than just the watch, I explained. He had been investing for years, building a substantial portfolio that he kept separate from his other assets. He left it all to me in a trust that Robert could never touch. This revelation clearly surprised Robert, whose expression darkened further. Thomas barely made 6 figures. What kind of substantial portfolio could he possibly have built? A very impressive one, I replied. It turns out Dad was quite savvy with his investments. He lived simply and invested wisely, primarily to ensure I would be financially secure, especially given his concerns about your influence over Mom's finances. I turned to my mother, softening my tone. Mom, I didn't come here for money or revenge. I came because you deserve to know the truth about what happened, about how Robert used you to hurt Dad and his colleagues. And because I want you to understand why that watch means so much to me beyond its monetary value. I picked up the Rolex and carefully demonstrated the hidden compartment, showing her the tiny photograph of Dad and me at the beach. He kept this picture of us hidden in the watch for years, I explained, along with a key that led me to discover everything else. This watch was not just a timepiece to him. It was a way to keep his most precious memories close and to eventually share important truths with me when the time was right. My mother's eyes filled with tears as she looked at the photograph. I remember that trip. It was after I canceled our summer plans to go to Europe with Robert. Dad took me to see the ocean for the first time, I said. He never complained about you canceling. Never made me feel like I was a burden. He just wanted me to be happy. The room fell silent as the weight of these revelations settled over everyone. Robert stood rigid by the fireplace, his usual confidence shattered. Dominic avoided everyone's gaze, suddenly very interested in the pattern of the carpet. My mother dabbed at her eyes with a tissue, the full impact of her husband's deception finally sinking in. What happens now? She finally asked, looking between Robert and me. That depends, I replied. I have no interest in a protracted legal battle or in causing you pain, Mom. But I will not pretend this never happened. And I will not allow Robert to dismiss it as just business. I turned to Robert. Here is what is going to happen. First, you and Dominic will reimburse me the $15,000 I spent recovering my father's watch. Second, you will make a donation of $20,000 to the retirement fund for former employees of Dad's firm who lost their jobs because of your actions. Third, you will acknowledge to Mom exactly what you did and why, without minimizing or justifying it. And if I refuse? Robert challenged, though his tone lacked conviction. Then I will forward copies of everything I have to the Securities and Exchange Commission, the State Attorney General, and the business partners you deceived at Westlake. I will also share it with a journalist friend who would find it very interesting. The statute of limitations may have expired on some aspects, but the court of public opinion has no such restrictions. Your reputation would never recover. Robert and I stared at each other for a long moment. Finally, it was my mother who broke the standoff. You will do as Eliza asks, Robert, she said quietly but firmly. All of it. And then you and I will have a very long conversation about trust and respect in this marriage. The surprise on Robert's face matched my own. I had never heard my mother take such a definitive stand against him before. Kathleen, be reasonable, he began. I am being extremely reasonable, she interrupted. Considering what you did to Thomas and his colleagues, considering how you used me to do it. Eliza's requests are minimal. It could have been much worse. Robert recognized defeat when he saw it. Fine. I will have the money transferred tomorrow. For both the watch and the donation? And the acknowledgement? I pressed. He sighed heavily. Yes. I used information your mother shared about Thomas's bid to gain an advantage. I undercut their proposal and directed contracts to my own companies. It was unethical. I was jealous of the respect Kathleen still had for him, and I wanted to prove I was more successful. My mother shook her head sadly. All these years, I thought Thomas's company struggled because of market forces. I had no idea you were behind it. There is one more thing, I said, turning to Dominic. The truth about where the watch money really went. Dominic squirmed uncomfortably. I did spend some on app development, but I also used it to pay off gambling debts. The coffee app was never going to work. I just needed the money. Gambling debts? Robert exploded. You told me you needed it for business expenses. I will let you two work that out, I said, standing up. Mom, can we talk privately before I go? She nodded, following me to the kitchen while Robert began berating Dominic in the living room. Once alone, my mother reached for my hands. Eliza, I am so sorry about the watch. I should have protected it for you. Respected Thomas's wishes. I let Robert convince me. It was the right thing to do. Why, Mom? Why would you give away the one thing Dad specifically left me? She sighed deeply. I've spent so many years trying to prove to Robert that he comes first, that my life with Thomas is truly over. When he suggested selling the watch to help Dominic, refusing felt like choosing Thomas over him again. It was wrong, and I see that now. It hurt me deeply, I admitted. But I am more concerned about you. Are you happy in this marriage, Mom? Really happy? She hesitated, which was answer enough. We've been together a long time. You don't just throw that away. You also don't stay in a relationship where you're not respected or valued, I countered gently. Dad's evidence showed me how manipulative Robert can be. Is that really what you want for the rest of your life? I don't know, she admitted. I need time to think. To process everything I've learned tonight. Take all the time you need, I said. But know that whatever you decide, I will support you. Even after everything that has happened, you are still my mother, and I love you. She hugged me tightly, something she hadn't done in years. Your father would be so proud of how you handled this, she whispered. You have his strength and his compassion. 6 months later, much had changed. True to his word, Robert had transferred the money for both the watch and the donation to the retirement fund. My mother had moved out, temporarily, taking an apartment downtown while she reevaluated her marriage. Dominic had entered a program for gambling addiction, finally confronting the real issues behind his failed ventures. As for me, I had used a portion of my inheritance to start my own marketing consultancy, specializing in helping small engineering firms, much like my father's. The Rolex remained on my wrist, a constant reminder of Dad's wisdom and foresight. My relationship with my mother had begun to heal, built on a new foundation of honesty. We met weekly for coffee, slowly rebuilding the trust that had been damaged. She had recently confided that she was considering filing for divorce, a decision I assured her I would support either way. The most unexpected development had been my friendship with Harold Jackson, the pawn shop owner who had called me about the watch. He had become something of a mentor, sharing business advice from his decades of experience. I had even helped him set up a proper website for Jackson's valuables, bringing his business into the digital age. The watch that had been at the center of so much conflict now represented something different to me. Not just a connection to my father, but a reminder that the truth, however painful, eventually comes to light. That standing up for what is right, even against family, takes courage, but brings peace. And that forgiveness does not mean forgetting or enabling further harm, but rather freeing yourself from the burden of resentment while maintaining healthy boundaries. As I sat in my new office, watching the second hand of the Rolex tick steadily forward, I thought about how time moves only in one direction. We cannot go back and change the past, but we can learn from it, honor it, and use its lessons to build a better future. That, I believed, was what my father had wanted for me all along. What would you have done in my situation? Would you have confronted your family with the truth, or kept it to yourself to maintain peace? Tell me what you think, I really want to know. Share your stories in the comments below. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video if it resonated with you. Thank you for being part of this journey with me.